Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. Close to Prabhupada. Today we will begin our discussion on the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. It's titled The Yoga of the Supreme Person, also known as Purushottam Yoga. So, quick recap in terms of how we got over here. That in the 12th chapter, Krishna puts the final ultimate destination in perspective. He speaks about pure devotional service. Then he starts speaking about the obstacles to achieving it. So in the 13th chapter, he speaks about the enjoying propensity of the jiva, being the mini kshetragya, the small purusha, trying to exploit prakriti, which essentially binds the jiva to the material world. Then in the 14th chapter, he elaborated on the nature of this binding. That this binding is not like a box or like a prison cell, but it's like a rope. And actually it's three ropes that are intertwined with one another, and they bind the jiva to the material world. And this is of course the modes of material nature. So in the 15th chapter, Krishna concludes this line of thinking by elaborating further on the nature of this bondage. That how does this modes actually bind the jiva to the material world. Because if the jiva is simply bound by the ropes, then it would indicate that he is immobilized and bound to the material world, but actually the jiva is extremely active. So what is the nature of this binding? And then towards the end of the 15th chapter, Krishna will speak about how to escape this binding. And that's the real purpose why Krishna speaks 13th, 14th and 15th chapter, that he is describing the nature of the imprisonment in details so that the jiva can understand how to free oneself from it. Also so that the jiva can understand the imprisonment is factual. So many times when we are in the middle of something, we do not have the perspective. So like if you're on the earth planet, you do not know that the earth is round. But if you are able to get onto a ship and go far away, then you can see the earth planet in details. So this objectivity only comes through detachment. And Krishna is trying to encourage that detachment. So the first part of this chapter talks about the famous cosmic tree. So what I'll do is that I will, the first 5 verses, I will read them together, because they're essentially all describing, they're in close continuation with one another, that they're describing the cosmic tree, and then with the help of a picture I will summarize the content of these 5 verses. Okay, so then I'll start reading out from verses 1 to 5. Verse 1, chapter 15. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Urdhvamulam Adha Shakham Ashvatham Prahuravyayam Chandam Siyasya Pranani Yastam Veda Saveda Ved. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upwards and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. Next verse. Adhaschordvam prasarta satasya shakha guna pravarda vishaya pravalaha adhascha mulanya anushantatani karmanubandhini manushaloke. The branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. The tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. Verses 3 and 4. Narupamaseha tathopalabhyate nanto nachadir nasa sampratishta ashvatham menam suvirudhamulam asangashastrena dradena chitva tatah padam tad parimargitavyam yasmin gatana nivartanti bhuyah tameva chadyam purusham prapadye yatah pravriti prashtha purani. Translation. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. Next verse. Verse 5. Nirman moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivarta kamaha dvandver vimukta sukha dukkha samagye gachanti amudha padam avyayam tat. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion and false association, and who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. So these 5 verses give us a description of the cosmic tree, and also gives us the process to free ourselves from that tree. So we'll first begin by understanding what is it this cosmic tree represents. So I'll show a slide with a description of the tree, and then we will go over the various aspects of that tree. So you can see a slide which shows us this cosmic tree. So the tree that is growing normally pointing upwards, that is the spiritual world, the original existence, and assuming it to be situated at the banks of a river, there is a reflection of the tree that is now growing downwards. So this downward reflection of the tree is the material world, which is essentially what is being described in this chapter. So while it looks like a normal tree, it is not, because it is inverted. The Srila Prabhupada mentions that this water that is inverting the tree is actually the perverted material desires of the conditioned jiva. So on this water of desire, material desires, the spiritual world is inverted to become the material world. Now let's look at the various aspects of the tree that Krishna describes. So firstly, there is the root of the tree. So the root of the tree is the abode of Lord Brahma. Now it's called the abode of Lord Brahma because this is the source of the tree. So the metaphor of the tree does not include the jivas. Right? The jivas are essentially can be compared to be birds like sit on the various branches of the tree, but the tree itself is simply the material world. There's no living entity in this cosmic tree or the description of the cosmic tree. And so Brahma, of course, being a jiva, is not part of the cosmic tree, but is mentioned at the root because the material world is created through Brahma. So he is the source of the visarga, the secondary creation from which this tree emanates. Then the branches of the tree represent a form or a species or a body that the jiva can occupy. So a branch could represent a demigod, a Gandharva, Brahma, the human beings, animals, snakes, insects. So there are millions of species and millions of subspecies, and each branch, it represents a particular form corresponding to that species. Now each branch comes with it so think of a branch that is now that is further branching. So there are tips, there are multiple branch tips, and these are compared to the senses. And these branch tips are connected by twigs. So twigs are like secondary branches. So these are considered to be the sense objects. So essentially, the body comes with a set of senses that are connected with the corresponding sense objects. Then now on the branch there are leaves also. So the leaves are essentially kamya karma, or activities that are performed for sense gratification. And the branch also has secondary roots. So if you have seen a real life banyan tree, there is a main trunk and then there are small secondary roots, hundreds and thousands of them, that fall down from the branches into the soil. So these secondary roots are past impressions. They are karma anubandhans, which means that by performing activities, what follows is that we get bound to performing the same kind of activity again. If somebody takes intoxicants, they become addicted to it, and then they're bound to take it again and again. That's the nature of material activities. So these are the secondary roots. So this tree is being nourished from in three ways. So if you look at the banyan tree, it is getting its nourishment from the primary trunk, it's getting its nourishment from the secondary roots, and it is getting its nourishment from the leaves. So similarly, the jiva is being nourished in the material world in three ways. One is the primary creation of the jiva in the material world, or rather the body of the jiva in the material world, which is the process of visarga that is coming from Lord Brahma. That is the main trunk. Then there is the secondary roots. So these are the vasanas, or the karma anubandhans, or the prior impressions that are forcing the jiva to act again and again. Then there are the leaves. These are kamya karmas. So these are fruitive activities that make the tree look very attractive. And essentially, the three modes of material nature are nourishing the trees. So just like the tree needs water, this tree is nourished by the three modes of material nature. So the branches that are closer to the root are more subtle, more evolved forms, like that of the devas. And the branches that are farther away are more primitive forms. So further down the tree are the humans, even further down are animals and plants and asuras. So important to understand that the tree does not represent the distribution of planets in the universe. It just represents the distribution of the forms that the jiva can take in the material world. Now there is a certain amount of correspondence between the planets and the forms, in the sense that the devas live in the heavenly planets and the asuras live in the lower planets, but that is coincidental. Actually, the tree has nothing to do with the structure of the universe. It is simply showing the distribution of the various kind of forms in terms of the branches. Each form comes with its own senses and sense objects, the branch tips and the twigs. Each branch having its leaves, which is activities performed for sense gratification, and each branch comes with its own secondary roots, which is impressions from prior activities. The fruits on the branches are the Chatur Purushartha, karma, dharma, artha, kama and moksha. So this is what is the enjoyable results of the jiva occupying a particular body. Now, not all the branches bear fruits, just like not all the forms engage in Chatur Purushartha. The animals, they engage in a very limited form of dharma, artha, kama, moksha. There's no moksha for them. It's essentially they follow a certain predetermined set of activities. But the humans, they have the access to the full fruits of the Chatur Purushartha. Now, if you understand this tree, now think of the jiva as a bird that is jumping from one branch to another. So this is the process of transmigration, and essentially that is what Krishna is describing through the tree. That the tree is so vast and complex that it is difficult for the jiva to escape it. When it thinks it escapes it, all it has done is jump from one branch to another. So Krishna is encouraging us to find the root of the tree. Now, what is the root of the tree? The root of the tree is the point of inversion of the tree, which is the basis of the fall of the jiva into the material world, which is the perverted material desires. So Krishna is encouraging us to find the root of the tree, and then he says, cut the tree down with the axe of detachment. Asanga shastrena, sharpened by dridena. So dridena means discrimination. So firstly, know what things are. So if you think of an axe, there is a handle of the axe, and then there is the axe, the blade of the axe. So dridena, knowledge, is the handle of the axe. That gives the jiva the ability to wield the axe. And what is the axe sharpened with? With asanga shastrena, with detachment. Which means that as long as the jiva is jumping around in the tree, they will never be able to escape it. But once the jiva begins to understand what this tree is all about and develops detachment, then the jiva is able to cut down the tree. Now, this tree essentially is described in two ways. It is known as Ashva. So Ashva means it means banyan tree also. It also means, so means not and shva means tomorrow. So ashva means that which will not exist tomorrow, which means that one that is temporary. And Krishna also describes it as avyayam. So avyayam means eternal. So how can something be temporary as well as eternal at the same time? So the acharyas explain this in two ways. One, he says that the tree is temporary because it's constantly changing. So today the jiva is in one branch, tomorrow is another branch. Today is in a branch that is high, tomorrow is in a branch that is low. So it is ashva. Tomorrow the tree is different from what it was today. But it is avyayam in the sense that the jiva is forever trapped in this tree. Another explanation also is that the tree is ashva or temporary for the devotees, and avyayam or eternal for the non-devotees. So Krishna ends with talking about the qualities that the jiva should develop in order to escape this tree. So overall he talks about two things: developing material detachment and then also cultivating spiritual attachment. Right. So quickly I'll summarize again. So this is the description of the metaphorical. It's a metaphor because there is actually no such tree. So when Krishna says there's a tree that's upside down, you won't really find any such tree in the material universe. It's just a metaphor. And in this metaphorical upside down tree, the roots is Lord Brahma, or the source of secondary creation. The branches are the different body forms of the living entities that represent a particular combination of the gunas. Then the tips of the branches are the senses, and the twigs or the small growths on the branches are the sense objects. The fruits are the Chaturpurushat, Dharma, Artha, Kam, Moksha. The leaves are Kamya Karmas or fruitive activities. The secondary roots are the past impressions which become an impetus for the jiva to act. And if you put it together, the branches or the bodies have tips or senses and shoots which are sense objects. And driven by raga or leaves or desiring to enjoy the jiva, it strives for the various fruits. The tree is nourished in three ways: by the primary root, which provides it with the sustenance, with the Mahatattva, its secondary roots, which is the propensity to act, and the leaves, which is the injunctions or the desires for fruitive activities. And Krishna's recommendation is for the jiva to stop jumping from one branch to another branch in the tree, which is to escape the cycle of transmigration, this samsara chakra, and cut down this tree with the weapon of knowledge and discrimination. Now, cutting down the tree essentially means cutting down one's attachment to the tree. Right? So that the tree is there, it's avyayam. But when Krishna says cut down the tree, essentially what he means is that there is some kind of an attachment of the jiva to this tree. So when the jiva cuts down that attachment, then he escapes this reflection of the tree and goes to the real tree or goes to the spiritual world. So this is an overall description of our famous cosmic tree, and now we will continue with the next section of the chapter. Okay, verse 6. Na tad bhasyate suryo na shashanko na pavakaha yadgatvana nivartante tadham paramam mama. That supreme abode of mine is not illuminated by the sun or moon, nor by the fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. So in the next set of verses, Krishna is going to talk to us about the process of transmigration from verses 6 to 11. In this verse, Krishna is talking about the destination or the spiritual world. So in the 5th verse, Krishna had spoken about the qualities of the person who are able to escape the material world and attain the spiritual destination. Right? So it explained various qualities, that they should be nirman. Nirman means they should be without any pride. They should be nirmoha, free of false absorption. They should be jita sanga dosha. So sanga means attachment to material, especially relationships like affection for wife and sons and parents. So jita sanga dosha means they have overcome this fault of material attachment. Then they should be adhyatma nitya, which means that nitya means on a regular basis. Adhyatma means they should meditate on the spiritual aspect of one's existence. What is Atma? What is Paramatma? What is the nature of the relationship? Then they should be vimukta. Vimukta means they should be free of being disturbed from opposites such as heat and cold, happiness and distress. And they should be amudaha. Amudaha means that they should be knowledgeable about the process of surrender. So the qualities that are manifested in these people are only possible through the process of devotional service. So essentially what Krishna is saying, practice the path of bhakti, develop these qualities. And when these qualities manifest, then this supreme abode of mind is available to you. So Prabhupada says that paramam mama, mam in this verse is important. So actually the whole universe is the property of the Supreme Lord. But the spiritual world is paramam. That means it is the topmost, which is why Krishna is encouraging us to come over here. Next verse, verse 7. This is a fairly famous verse, often quoted by Srila Prabhupada. Mamevam shajiva loke jiva bhutah sanatana manah shashtani indriyani prakritisthani karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. So important verse because it gives us our relationship with Krishna. So Krishna says, Mame Vamsha Jiva Loka. So they are my eternal fragmental paths. So what does that indicate? That qualitatively the Jiva is exactly the same as Krishna. Krishna is Satchidananda, the Jiva is Satchidananda. But they are Mameva Amsho. So they are fragmental parts. So Krishna is infinite and the Jiva is infinitesimal. Also the possessive, the my eternal fragmental parts indicates that there is always a distinction between Krishna and Jiva. Otherwise Krishna would not say Mameva Amsha. Eva means certainly. He says that there is no dispute about it. So when I say that this belongs to me, then there is a distinction between that thing and myself. So what is this verse telling us? That the Jiva is qualitatively the same as Krishna. They are both eternal spiritual in nature. Second, Krishna is infinite and the jiva is infinitesimal. And thirdly, there is always a distinction between the jiva and Krishna. Then in the second line, jiva bhuta sanat manasastani, third line, manasastani indriyani prakritistani karshati. Now he is talking about the conditioned jiva. Jivas like us who are in the material world, he says that they are manasastani indriyani. That because of the six senses which include the mind, they are karshati. Karshati means they are struggling very hard. So that's the nature of the material existence. So even though within the material world we consider this karshati to be very enjoyable, but once we develop this detachment, then we take a step back, then we understand that this is actually a very, very hard struggle for existence that is being experienced by the five senses and the mind. Next verse. Verse 8. Shariram yadavapnoti yachapya utkramatishvaraha grahitvaitani samyati vayurgannani vashvayat. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus, he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. So the previous verse talked about the nature of the jiva as being qualitatively the same as Krishna, quantitatively different. Also talked about the conditioned jiva that is struggling with the mind and the senses. This verse talks about the nature of the struggle. This verse essentially describes transmigration of the soul. So Krishna uses the analogy of air carrying aromas. So we have experienced that if there is air that is coming from a garden or a flower bed, it has a very sweet aroma. And when the same air, it goes over a garbage dump, it has a very pungent aroma. Now it's the same air. Its intrinsic quality is not changing. But because of the association with either pleasant aroma substance or a pungent aroma substance, it seems to become aromatic or pungent. That is how transmigration happens. That the jiva's soul is always pure. But when the soul, through the media of the subtle body, it associates with different modes, then it sometimes becomes in the mode of goodness, sometimes in the mode of passion, and sometimes the mode of ignorance. So it's the subtle body that carries these impressions, and it also carries within it the soul from one body to another. Right? So that's how transmigration happens. That while the soul is changing bodies, whether it's in the body of a demigod or a demon or an animal or human, the soul is always the same. But what is driving the soul to take to a certain kind of body is the impressions that are embedded in the subtle body. And these impressions in the subtle body are acquired from the actions of the gross body. So if a person using their senses and the Gyan Indriya and the Karma Indriya performs a lot of sinful activities, then the subtle body, it carries all these impressions. Srila Prabhupada in the Bhagavad-gita, he gives this, he has this picture plates of how if somebody is very much attracted to meat eating, then they get the body of a carnivore, right? Because the subtle body now has all those desires, these attractions for meat eating. So when the soul leaves the body, then the subtle body, it desires a body that is suitable for meat eating. And that's how the process of transmigration happens. Next verse. Verse 9. Shrotram chakshuh sparshanam cha rasanam granam eva cha adhisthaya manaschayam Vishayanupasevate. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. So in this verse, Krishna is explaining how does the desires of the jiva translate into a particular kind of body. So in the current body, the jiva has performed certain actions, and because of that, the jiva has conditioned with certain desires. In order to fulfill those desires, it needs a certain type of ear, eye, tongue. So it needs a certain combination of senses, which are grouped around the mind. Based on that, the next body of the jiva is determined. Right? So if a living entity has a strong desire to fly, then may not be able to do so in the present body, but will get a next body in which the senses around the mind are specifically designed to allow the body to fly. Right? So if we link this back to our the tree that Krishna talked about, essentially this is the process of the jiva jumping from one branch to another. Each branch has a particular set of twigs and branch tips and leaves, and while the jiva is sitting on that branch, it develops a desire for a different kind of branch, a different kind of senses, a different kind of body, and at the time of death, the subtle body then carries the jiva to the respective body. So this is how the mind plays such a strong role in transmigration. That our next body is determined by what we desire and what we deserve. So we may desire the body of a demigod, but if we have performed impious activities, we will not get one. So it's a combination of what we desire and what we deserve. Okay. Next verse. Verse 10. Utkramantam sthitam vapi bhunjanam va gunanivitam vimudananupashyanti pashyanti jnana chakshushaha. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. So in this verse, Krishna is kind of addressing this implicit question that how come we don't have empirical evidence of it? How come we do not see the soul going from the body of a human to that of a fish or a bird? How come the jiva does not remember its previous existence? So Krishna says the only way to understand this process of transmigration, pashyanti jnana chakshusha, is by the eyes of knowledge. Specifically, it is shastra jnana, by knowledge that is given by Krishna in the scriptures. He says, Vimuda na pushyanti, that those who are foolish, they can never understand this because they do not surrender to the process of ascending or descending knowledge. They want everything to be verified empirically. But those who are connected to a sampradaya, who are surrendered to the process of getting the knowledge from the scriptures, they can understand that how the soul is transmigrating from one body to another. Next verse. Verse 11. Yatantu yoginaschainam pashyanti atmane avasthitam yatantu pyakartatmano nainam pashyanti achetashah. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. So for emphasis, Krishna is repeating the same point he made in the previous verse because it is important. Repetition is a form of emphasis. So one can only understand this process of transmigration by surrendering to the scriptures. So Krishna says that those who are not situated in self-realization, right? So self-realization means study of the scriptures, developing a spiritual understanding. So they can never see this process of transmigration, and they will have so many arguments to negate it. How can the body be created just when the soul is leaving the previous body? And biggest is, have you ever seen transmigration happen? What happens to the previous memories? So many arguments that they do, but here Krishna is talking about the fundamental difference, that those who are situated in self-realization, who are reading the scriptures under the guidance of a guru, they can understand this, not anybody else. So Prabhupada in the purport also talks about the real yoga. He says there are so many people who teach yoga as a gymnastics way, and through that you can never understand this process of transmigration. Real yoga is Bhakti yoga, wherein we see our position, we see Krishna's position, we see material nature, we see this cosmic tree, we see the reflection, and then we also understand the mechanics of transmigration. Okay, so we'll end over here. We'll resume from the 12th verse in our next discussion. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.